Hi everyone. Right before I get going, a few housekeeping things. If you have VS Code and you have a laptop with you, please go to the extension store and just install this thing. It's called VS Code Vim. Also, if you're in Overleaf, if you have that available, just go down to the menu and go down to Key Bindings, and then just select Vim in there. And if you're really fancy and you have a terminal open in a Unix-based environment, just open that right now, and you should be able to follow along with most or some of my talk. So today I'm going to be presenting an introduction to modal-based text manipulation and terminal multiplexing. My name is Griffin Higgins, so let's jump into this bad boy. I'm a cybersecurity software developer here at CIC. A little bit about myself. I have a background in computer science, sociology, and cybersecurity. And a little bit about me too. I love nerdy things. If you ever come to my desk, I have this kind of wild keyboard that helps me do even crazier things with the tools I'm about to talk with today. So on our agenda, we're going to be talking a lot about this tool called Vim. And it stands for VI Improved, or VI Imitation as it originally was known. We're going to talk a little bit about the motivation for this tool. The whole talk is actually a little bit of motivation. We're going to talk about the different modes Vim has. We're going to talk about its expression syntax that is kind of unlike anything you probably are familiar with. And then we're going to motivate it further with some examples like the jump list and change list Vim has, as well as some of the registers and macros that are available in Vim, as well as its external filter that we can use in kind of cybersecurity centric situations, especially capture the flag events. After this, we're going to talk about Tmux, which is a terminal multiplexer. Again, we're going to give a little bit of motivation for this tool and talk about its multiplexing capabilities, as well as its non-multiplexing capabilities. And time permitting, we might talk a little bit about the bonus of how to actually configure these tools to do almost limitless things that you would want to have happen. And if you're thinking to yourself, Griffin, this sounds like a lot of things we're going to be talking about today. How on earth are we going to have enough time? We might not, and if not, that's okay. Please come talk to me if you have any questions after the talk. And this is the formal agenda, but the informal agenda is going to look a lot more like this. And this is something that my professors have lovingly done to me over the last months. So now we might say that the shoe's on the other foot, so to speak. So getting started with this text editor, it's called Vim, and it's commonly referred to as a programmer's text editor because it's often run inside of the terminal. But I would actually contest this, and I would say that this isn't anybody's text editor. It doesn't matter if you're an English major, it doesn't matter if you're an administration coordinator, it doesn't matter if you're a software developer. This thing is going to be useful for you if you put in a little bit of time and effort to master it. So I say this is an anyone's text editor, and then I immediately jump into a programmatic analogy. But I would say that Vim is to text editing as what grep is to text parsing. And if any of you have ever had to use grep, you might kind of hate your life a little bit while you try and navigate its kind of abstract syntax. But if you think about what this might be like if you had to do the same thing in a programming language like C, you would realize that you would hate your life even more. And that's kind of the point, is that you invest a little bit of your time into this high cost startup thing to save yourself a lot of pain and agony later. And that's exactly what Vim is going to do for you. So I put an asterisk beside Vim because Vim the binary, if we're talking about Alpine Linux, lives at user bin VI, right? And that's the actual program that we run. But Vim, the expression syntax that we're going to talk about today, can live anywhere, right? And I'm about to show you this. So this is actually Overleaf. Overleaf has a Vim mode. This is VS Code. VS Code actually has a Vim extension that you can install. This is actually Colab. Colab actually has a Vim mode of all things. And even your browser, even Alpine Linux, a Docker image that prides itself on being very lightweight, has this text editor built in, so you know it's going to be important. Additionally, this is Vim in your browser. So on the left is Vimium for Chrome and Vimari for Safari, actually. And then lastly, this is the Vim you can get at your grocery store. I'm just kidding. This is a totally different Vim, no relation. So what actually is this thing, and how does it work? So Vim has these things called modes because it's a modal editor. Most of our lives we're familiar with things like modeless editors, like language processors, or text processors, like Microsoft Word, right? But in Microsoft Word, we often want to do the following actions. We often want to move around our document by kind of like scrolling with our mouse. Or we might want to type in text with our keyboard. Or we might want to highlight things with our mouse, right? Or we might even want to run kind of commands and like save a file or open it to another place or whatever we want to do. And Vim actually has these exact same things, and it goes by the following terms. But I'm not actually going to keep these up. I'm going to replace them with its kind of plain text equivalent. So in normal mode, or the blue part, is where we start. And here we move around and we do things, and we're going to get to what that is in a moment. But if we press I, we can actually go into this mode that lets us type regularly, as if we were just using a modeless text editor. If we escape, we can actually go back to normal mode with just the escape key, and then we can actually go to other modes. So we're always trying to come back to normal mode. But if we're in normal mode, we can also start highlighting things by just pressing V, and that lets us highlight whatever we want, and also do some other things. If we press escape, we can go back to normal mode, and then we can actually go to do other things that we might want to do in command mode or the far left with just a colon. And it lets us save the file or even quit the whole program with Control Q. And then we can come back to escape and move back into normal mode, because often we just want to be moving around the document. It's a very motion-centric text editor. So how do these modes actually translate? If you're following along in like VS Code or something, I'm just going to show you that these are possible. So you can see at the very bottom when we start up the text editor, we'll be in this thing called normal mode. But if we press the key I, and over on the very far left, you can see like what I'm typing as I'm following along. If I press I, we'll go into insert mode, and then we can actually start typing some text like ha 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 ha, right? But if we want to press escape, we can go back to normal mode, and then we can do other things. But we can also go into visual mode if we press V, and then we can start highlighting things just using our keyboard. We're not using our mouse. If we want to go back to normal mode, we can escape. Now we're back in normal mode. And finally, if we want to run some commands and save the file, we're going to hit colon, and that's actually going to take us to the very bottom of this editor where we can start typing commands. So if we actually wanted to save this file, we're just going to say W, and we're going to write to the file, whatever we did. And we'll see that that little blip at the top went away. So that's kind of like how the different modes in Vim work, but really we're going to be focusing on the doing things part of this text editor. And here is this thing that's called the Vim graphical cheat sheet. I actually made a few copies of these, and they look like this. They're in the back of the room, and then on the very back is one for Tmux. If you do want to try this thing, it should be able just to stand right on top of your monitor, so you can refer to whatever I'm talking about later on. And it's very helpful if you're trying to learn this. But after a while, you won't even have to think about it. Your brain is just going to say, start typing text, whatever, or you can do whatever else you're going to do that we just start talking about now. So this is the Vim graphical cheat sheet. It's a lot to take in. You're not going to do it all in one go. It's kind of like that fire hydrant analogy that we're drinking from. It's going to take a little bit of time, but let's actually see what this does and explain it. So at a very high level, anything in green that you see as a key on your keyboard is going to move you around the text editor right away, or do some kind of operation right away without modifying the buffer. And the buffer is just kind of like the place where the text is, if you don't already know. So for example, if we wanted to move the cursor that we were on to the start of the next word, we can just say W for word. So if we are at this very start of this word here, if we say W, we'll hop to the next word, and then if we keep pressing W, we can keep hopping along. Conversely, we can actually go back by just pressing B, and then we can go to the end of a word with pressing E. So there's often mnemonics for everything that we're going to do. So if you ever have to think about it, you might need the cheat sheet for a little while, but after a while you're going to say, go to the end of the word, oh yeah, E. So with this, we can describe like how words actually are going to work, and we can move around them as their words. Vim also has ways of describing what sentences are. So a sentence is anything that ends with a period and a space, and we go to them with just parentheses. So we can hop to the at, and then the next time we press it, it's going to hop us to the start of the next sentence right here. So that's actually insanely useful if we're just writing regular text. And this applies even if we're in something like Overleaf. So if we go down, we can actually start hopping through our sentences this way. And and you'll see later that we can delete an entire sentence, we can copy an entire sentence without really much effort at all. So outside of this, Vim also knows what paragraphs are, and a paragraph is any piece of contiguous text where the text is touching on each line. So just in a fancy way, we can see that if I press the squirrely braces, we can see we're going to jump down one, we can jump down another one, jump down another one, jump down another one, and we're hopping over any piece of contiguous text. This is very useful, especially if you're doing a lot of work in code, for example, and you want to hop like over functions or into parts of classes or not. It lets you get there very quickly. So that's just kind of the navigation aspect of Vim. But there's also kind of this changing ability for Vim that it gives you, that you can make small changes right away. So for example, if I am on a character and I want to delete the character that my cursor is on, I can just press X. So if I wanted to delete this 2, for example, I can just say X and then it's gone. And I'm still in normal mode, so I can still move around, I can still navigate the buffer. Also, something I just forgot to go over was that the arrow keys on your keyboard, they're not really used, and the idea is that you keep your hands in the keyboard so you can move around and perform operations without really having to take your hands off the keyboard, because in the end it's very expensive to move your hand to the mouse and back all day long, 24/7, 365. And it's not about just being faster, it's about not having to supply as much effort into the things that you do all the time, right? So yeah, after that we can delete characters and we're still in normal mode, so we can still hop around and do whatever we would want to do. So that's everything in yellow you see pretty much will do something like that. I'm not going to go over the rest of them because I want to make sure I'm kind of in time. But the last thing we're going to talk about, and this is the most important thing about Vim's expression syntax that it has, is the notion of a text object. So when we talk about pieces of text that are important to us, we might want to say like a paragraph or a sentence or a word or something that's surrounded by parentheses or something that's surrounded by quotes or a function or a bunch of things that are indented, right? And we can describe these things by actually specifying them with text objects. So if we wanted to copy the inner part of a paragraph that our cursor is on, and I'll explain what this is in a moment, we don't have to go over to our mouse and figure out where the start of the paragraph is and go and figure out where the end of it is and maybe like right click and forget where it all is. We just say YIP and it's done. It's in our clipboard, we don't have to think about it again. So how does this actually work? Like what is this text object thing? Why would I care? Well, how we specify it is that we start with what we want to do. So oftentimes we might want to change some text. Oftentimes we might want to delete some text. Oftentimes we might want to copy some text. So we first specify what we want to do. So in your brain you're going to say, I want to copy this thing. And then the next part is you're going to say, do I want to get the inner part or do I want to get around this part? Or do I want to get this thing inclusively or exclusively? And I'll get to that in what I mean in just a moment. And then the last thing we're going to specify is the actual identifier for the text object itself. So for example, if I wanted to copy everything inside of parentheses, I would just say YI parentheses. If I wanted to copy everything inside the parentheses, including the parentheses themselves, I would say YA parentheses, right? So an example of this would be if I went to B, and let's say I wanted to copy everything inside of this string, right? Normally I'd have to take my cursor, I'd have to go to the T and figure out where it is and like Control C and all this stuff. But now I can actually just say YI everything inside the quotes, and now if I go down to a new line and paste it, you'll actually see I have it. And I didn't really have to put much effort into that at all. So the other thing we could say is if we wanted to delete everything around the string too, including the quotes, we could see DA and then whatever those quotes would be, and we can see it's gone. We didn't actually have to find the start of it and the end of it and delete it itself. It's just something we have available to us. So I know this is a lot to take in. It's why the cheat sheets are there. They're in the very back of the room too if you want to pick one up. But yeah, if anyone has any questions about that after the talk, please just let me know and I'll explain some more. So with that being said, Vim also stores everywhere you go in terms of it being a big jump or a big change in a document as a file, row, and column tuple onto a stack. And And essentially all this means is that wherever you go, Vim is going to keep track. So if you go to a certain document and then maybe you go somewhere else later and you say, oh, I want to go back to wherever I was, but you don't want to have to think about wherever you were, you can just say Control O and Vim is going to skip you back to wherever you were, and then it's going to let you go back to where you were before that with Control I. And this is insanely useful. I use this all day long. So if we were in this document and I just start hitting Control O, we can see that I'm jumping through everywhere I just was in this talk, right? And if I hit Control I can go back to wherever I just was now. So this is insanely useful and insanely, it's going to insanely help your productivity. So that's the jump and the change list. Whenever you make a small change in a document as well, Vim's going to do the same thing, but I'm not going to cover it because it's very similar to the jump list. Vim also has marks. So these are essentially just little bookmarks that you can put on files. And you can have local marks, which are only going to be internal to the file that you're referencing right now. And then you can have global marks. And the global marks only really apply to when you're using Vim like in the terminal, but they can extend anywhere in the file system. So if you are a system administrator and you have a very important file, like your SSHD config file that we're going to look at in a moment, you can literally just hop there and you won't have to think about CDing anything. We place a mark with M and then whatever the mark name is. And we can use anything from A to Z. And if we want to place a global mark, we could say anything from capital A to capital Z. And we can go to a mark by saying single quote mark name, and that will take us to the line, the start of the line that the mark is on, or we can say backtick mark name, and that will take us to the literal row cursor column where it is. So an example of this in Overleaf, and yes, I do know that Overleaf will give you this kind of like tab thing down here, and you can hop around in it. But what if I didn't want to do that? What if I literally just wanted to hop onto this word right here that said comment? And for whatever reason, this is just so important to whatever I'm doing, I have to be able to mark it. So if I just say M and then A, for example, it's now marked. And anywhere else I go in this document, let's just say I'm over here somewhere, if I ever just want to go to that spot without having to think about it very much, I can just say backtick A. And now it's at the very bottom, but the cursor is on that very start of the word comment. So you actually have this now coordinate system to mark places in your document, even in Overleaf, and that's very important. So after this, actually I'll show you the global marks as well. So if I am in just a shell and I say Vim, this is a special version of Vim called NeoVim, and I want to go to the SSH config file, I know that I've marked that with capital A. So I can say backtick A, and now I'm literally just in my SSHD config file. I haven't had to think about where it is. I can turn the password authentication on and off if I'm using like a lot of private keys and things, if I'm just testing it. So that's something that you can have available to you as a system administrator, and it's a killer feature. So after this, after the marks, we're going to talk a little bit about the registers and the macros. And this is kind of getting really deep into the weeds, but hopefully you'll use it. So user registers are basically clipboards. And you can have any clipboard, A through lowercase a through Z, 0 through 9. And you can put anything you want in there, right? And we select a register with double quotes, the register name. I know this seems like a lot to remember, but know that after a while, it's just gonna be muscle memory. You're not gonna have to remember anything. Your fingers are just gonna know what to do. And you're gonna say, yep, save this paragraph into this register B, save this paragraph into register A. And now you have not just one, but like over 30 clipboards that you can get at instantly. So we can perform operations after we've selected a register with that text object thing we were talking about earlier. So everything that we learned earlier also applies here. So for example, if we say double quotes A, YIP, it means select the A register and copy the text of the inner paragraph that my cursor is on into it. And I know this is a lot to take in, so I'm just gonna give an example instead. So if I'm on this function that says foo, if I say double quotes A and I say YIP, it will say at the very bottom, 4 lines have been yanked. And we can view the contents of our registers if we issue a command that's just called reg. And now if we scroll down, if we look at A, look, that thing that we set that was foo is now in our A register. Right? And if we want to, I don't think we can paste it from there. If we want to paste it, we can just say or double quotes A and then P. And now we have another copy of foo. You might be saying, well, this is kind of dumb. I can do this with my clipboard already. But what happens if we want to save a copy of foo somewhere and paste it, and then also have bar in our clipboard? We might have to figure out how to copy both these things, but this abstracts all of that away from you now. So you can say a double quotes B to select B register, and we can yank the inner paragraph into B. So now if we're someplace way far away in our program, let's actually say we're in another file, and we open another line, and let's say we select the A register and we paste, we get foo, right? And then let's say we're over here somewhere, and then let's say we want to paste B register. Let's say we want to paste bar. So if we select B and then paste, we can get bar. So we have all these clipboards immediately available to us. The last thing we're going to talk about is macros. So, or for this anyway. So a macro is essentially Vim will record whatever you type, because as we saw at the beginning, we can move through words, we can move through sentences, but we have a symbol for that. And if we have a symbol for it, it means that Vim can actually record it and then just do those things back as if we were actually typing on the keyboard itself. So we actually save this off as an instruction into a register, and we start it by saying Q. So we say Q the register name, and then we say Q to stop after we're done recording. And we can play a macro with the at register name, and then we can actually replay the last played macro with a double at sign. So this is kind of a wild thing, but let's say that we're in index.py. And let's say that we're at the very start of a function, and we just want a macro that capitalizes the function name. So if we're here, we can start recording a macro. We can say QA, and at the very bottom, it will say recording at A, and it will say that we're in normal mode. So now if we wanted to actually go to the start of the next word, which would be the function name, we can just say W. And now we're going to use a special command in Vim called GU, and then we're going to specify the text object, which would be the inner word, and now we'll actually have whatever that would be capitalized. And you might be thinking, oh, this is kind of a lot of work, but just bear with me. After this, we can actually search for the next function definition, which would be def, and then we can hop to it. And now we're going to stop recording the macro. We're going to say Q, so we're done. But now if we look, if we say reg again, at reg, or :reg, if we go down to A, we have this weird thing, and it has everything that we just typed in it, where we have W, G, capital U, I, W, / DEF, and enter. But if we play this back, Vim is going to do everything we just did, and then hop us down to the next place where this is. And we can actually just keep pressing this. We can just keep pressing at, and we'll soon capitalize every function name in the entire file. And this gets even wilder because we can actually call recursive macros. We can call at A, and we can record stuff, and at the very end we can say at A, and A will actually call itself over and over and over again in a loop, and it will run through the entire file. And if you're kind of thinking, oh my god, this sounds a lot like a computer, it's because it's actually Turing complete, right? We have registers, we have instructions, we have data, we have pointers with marks, we have all this stuff. And it's things that you have immediately access, or immediately available to you to do whatever you would need to do textually. So with that being said, Vim has one last crazy thing I'm going to talk about, and that's the exclamation operator. And this is essentially an escape hatch to the shell. And Vim can actually talk to the shell directly, either by highlighting text or by using text objects. So if you highlight some text and then you press exclamation mark, you will now be talking to the shell. And whenever you've highlighted, you can send to any program you define. And after you execute that, it will take whatever text has been processed and dump it right where you are. And I'm going to prove it to you. So if we are in, let's say that we're in this text file again, just to convince you some more. Let's say we say ls-al, right? And many of you might be familiar with this. This is like a command line like thing, like what are we doing? So if we highlight it and we say exclamation mark, and then we run this, oh sorry, exclamation mark, oh sorry, we actually have to specify that we're gonna put this through the shell as a command. We'll actually get the contents of our home directory. So, or whatever, yeah, for home directory. So that's absolutely wild. Like, we're just in a text editor, we're not in a shell, but we can still talk to the shell as if we were. And any program we define later, we can call out to. So I'm going to give a very brief example of this in terms of reverse engineering a password. There's also another example that Live Overflow gives, a famous YouTuber that does a lot of reverse engineering to patch a binary. So if you want to go look at that, it's about at the 5-minute mark, and I'll send you the link after. But for now, I'm going to show you this example of reverse engineering a password. And this is actually something that came up in the UMB Cybersecurity Club, if you were there, where if we go to this thing, it's called Pico CTF, it will give us this kind of challenge. And if we click the link, we're going to go to this kind of web page, and it's going to say, this is a secure login portal, please enter valid credentials, right? And we can try all kinds of passwords and stuff, but it's not really going to work. So what we can do is we can actually go look at the source code. And just to skip through a little bit, this is actually going to be the source code, right? So if we scroll up, we can see that there's HTML, and if we scroll down, we can see that there's all this other stuff. I'm going to skip ahead and just say that we read in the password into this variable here. And then afterwards, we basically substring this password, and we check it against the ROT13 encoded version of whatever that string would be. Sounds really complex, but Vim is actually going to make our lives a lot easier, because if we actually had to solve this pen and paper, it would take us probably 20 minutes. If we had to solve this and do like anything manually, that would be a lot of work. It would be a lot of work, but Vim is going to solve it for us. So I'm going to use some commands I haven't really covered, but that are going to be useful for you nonetheless. So if I just wanted to delete everything, including where I am, up to the top of the file, I can say DGG, right? And I'll delete everything to the top of the file. If I wanted to hop down some lines and I want to delete everything to the bottom of the file, I can say D, capital G. So now that's all gone. If I wanted to highlight everything I'm on, I can do that with a VIP. I can highlight the whole paragraph. If I wanted to substitute every space with nothing in this paragraph, I can actually start to enter a command, and I can say substitute with S, which is a lot like sed, if any of you are familiar with sed, and then I can specify a space and then nothing. So we're going to put it in a format that we can actually use in terms of it being a macro. And then afterwards, we're going to kind of look through this, and we're going to realize that these substrings need to be sorted. So we can say VIP and then exclamation mark, and now we're going to call it to the shell. And we're just going to use a sort command. So we can say sort, and now it's going to sort all these things in place. But we do have to be mindful that sometimes it might not be perfect. This split is actually going to need to be below 0, so we can delete it and then paste it. And then now we're ready to start doing stuff with macros. So if we go to the very start, we can start recording a macro, and we can delete to the first quote. So we can say df and then the first quote. We can hop to whatever that thing we just searched for with F was by saying semicolon, and then we can delete the rest of the line with D. I know I haven't covered all these things. I just want to show you how easy this can be. At the very end, we can hop to the start of the line, and then go down to the next line, and we stop the macro. So now we're done. And we can start replaying this, everything we just did on every line with @a, right? And then we can just, after this, we can say @@. So we can say @@, and now all this stuff starts to go away. And we're here. So if we wanted to join all of these lines and not include the space, Vim also gives us an opportunity to do that. We can say VIP, and then we can say G, capital J. And if you remember at the very start, all these strings were ROT13 encoded. So if we go to the actual implementation of Vim, we can actually see that Vim has a built-in ROT13 decoder, which is kind of hilarious. And we can use it by saying G question mark. So if we wanted to, we could just say G question mark, and now we actually have the flag. Which is hilarious, because if we had to do this ourselves, just pen and paper, it would take a while. So that's an example of where that might come up in a CTF, and you can solve something in if I didn't have to go through and explain it, it might take you 30 seconds versus 15 minutes. So with that being said, I'm going to hop into the second half of this talk, which is going to be about Tmux. And I'm actually going to leave VS Code. I'm going to move the shell over, because we're going to be using this a little more. No? Okay, fair enough. Okay, cool. So we're going to talk about Tmux, the author by Nicholas Marriott. I also forgot to mention that Vim, the creator of Vim, Bram Moolenaar, recently passed away. So the section of that I talked about for Vim is dedicated to him. So now that we're going to be talking a little bit about Tmux, what actually is this? And some motivation is that Tmux is to the terminal as what tabs in Windows are to your browser. So when you want to open up another tab, you can just click a plus. Tmux is going to give you that same kind of thing. And it also does much more. But what do I mean by multiplexing? And this is just essentially a very fancy word for selecting from multiple inputs. And it's kind of a hardware term, but we use it to select from multiple different terminals that we might have available to us. And there's also demultiplexer, and a multiplexer shorthand for it is just a mux. And Tmux also has some very basic bindings, no crazy keyboards and anything like that. This is very simple if you just want to use the simple features. So we're going to talk about these things: Sessions, Windows, and Panes. So in Tmux, you start with a pane, and in a pane you can run a command. So for example, if I wanted to run htop in the terminal, we could do that here, but if we start Tmux, if we start Tmux, you'll see that there's a green line at the bottom of this, and I'll actually move my typing. And it actually tells us that we're in Tmux versus if we're just in a regular shell. And Tmux is going to give us a couple IDs down here. These are very important. We'll get to those in a minute. But we can see that we can run htop here as well, just as in a pane. So if we go back, we can see that Tmux is actually hierarchical, and it gives us a window. And we're just looking at one pane in this window. But really, we could have as many panes as we want. So for example, the way we would split a pane is with the following key. So we would say Control B, and that just says, Tmux, I'm going to tell you to do something. Whenever you say Control B, the reason we use Control B is that it's not really used for anything else, so it won't really conflict with a lot of stuff. And after we say Control B, we can say double quotes, and it will split a new pane right below us, right? And note that we didn't actually have to click like plus or whatever, like if you're in another kind of terminal. And this is important because it's actually happening like right in your shell, so you can still do it on a remote machine. We can also split horizontally, so if we say Control B and a %, so now we're over here. So we can have like all these different programs running in the same window in different panes. But it gets even crazier because Tmux allows you to have a session which can contain multiple windows, which can contain multiple panes. And we can start a new window by saying Control B and C. And now we can actually see that if we're down here, it says 0 ZSH and then 1 ZSH is because we've moved over. If we want to go back to where we previously were in the other window, we can say Control B and then N, and we're back to where we were. So now we kind of have this thing where we can split different panes into different windows and hop through different panes in our session. And we can also have different sessions. So if we say Control B and then colon, which is kind of like Vim, we can say new session, right? And then now we're in a new session. It only has one pane, but if we want to move to the other session, we can say Control B and then parentheses, and now we're in the other session. We can view all these things in kind of one place if you don't like these key bindings with Control B and then W, and it will show us everything that we have available to us that we can get to. So you might be thinking, okay, this is kind of crazy. Why would we do this? And this is the last part, is that we can have multiple sessions in a server, right? But now what the heck does this mean, server? What does that imply? What does that imply if we have a server? It means that there's clients. But wait, what? I thought we were just having this thing that can split out windows and panes and sessions and stuff. Like, what do you mean a client? Well, it turns out multiple different clients can attach to the same or different sessions, and they can actually see the same thing. And this is very important if you're using the GPU, for example, to run long-running experiments involving like machine learning ops or anything else, because if your client disconnects, your program will still live. And that's very important. So an example of this would be if I actually open this up in VS Code. So if I go to my VS Code, wherever it is.
Will take around 10 more minutes?
Maybe 5.
Yeah, so
if that's okay. If people need to drop out, I won't be offended if you need to hop on to another call. But yeah, I'll wrap up very soon. So if we are in like a whole new place, we're in VS Code, for example, we can actually still run Tmux in the terminal. So if we say Tmux, and then we want to also say attach, because we want to attach to whatever is existing, attach, we'll actually see that we're in that session that we just left off in. I'll actually close this. Where is it? Over here. Yeah, so we're in 1. But if we wanted to, we could actually go to the other session. We can say Control-B. Oh yeah. So we can see that we're now in that session with HTOP, and it's all kind of split out. But if we go back, let's see if we can actually move this to the other. It says if I show you this, it'll kind of click. So if we are now here and we minimize whatever is our terminal in VS Code, we can see that it actually shrinks in our other terminal. So if I kind of move this out of the way, we'll see that that box is now smaller and there's like dots everywhere. So like, what the heck is going on with that? And the reason for that is that when we're looking at this through an active window, it will match whatever the client that is looking at that is through the active window. So when I type in this terminal right here, I can say, ha 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 ha. I'm also typing in this other thing, even though I'm not actually even typing it. So we can be on two different machines looking at using the same Tmux server, and we can be talking to each other. So you can even use this for like pair programming, but the point that I really wanted to hit home is that you can use this for long-running operations. I'm going to prove this to you because if we are in VS Code, and let's just simulate that we're using the GPU and that our machine just experienced a power outage, right? And we're going to say, VS Code, you're the machine, and you're just going to die now, right? Our machine just died, and our program is still running, right? And we can, and that's super helpful for us. I remember Amir, when we were on the last project, when I was telling him about this, he was like, well, why would we need this? And then later on, he was like, oh, I realized like why we need this now. It's so that if something ever happens, I won't actually have to come and fix it, right? And the nice thing is you can close this down and then go back and check on it later. So the way you do that is by detaching from Tmux. And you can just say Control-B, D, and you'll be detached. And now if you close it out, you can close the computer. I'm not going to do it, but just let's pretend I did. You can come back to it later and it will still be alive. You can go about your life and come back and check on whatever programs you have are running. So I'm pretty sure that's the last thing I wanted to talk about. Oh no, it is. So Tmux also has a lot of other multiplexing capabilities, which are absolutely wild. You can take screenshots of your terminal and save them off to text files. You can issue global variables with Tmux and do things that you otherwise would be unable to do in a regular shell. You can synchronize panes. You can have like advanced scripting. You can bind new keys to be whatever you want with various key tables as well. And all these features are things that if you wanted to come talk to me, I'll tell you all about them, and you might need to get me a shout out about it. But with that being said, a couple references I would have would be the Tao of Tmux is a really great resource. I use all the screenshots from it for this talk, so it might be familiar, but it'll tell you everything you would ever need to know about it. You can also run these commands in the shell. It's kind of a weird reference, but it's true. So if we open up the shell, we say man, short for manual, Tmux. We can open up the documentation and we can scroll through, and we can see that it's pretty exhaustive. It goes on for a while. And then we can also, if we wanted to have practice with Vim, the other tool I was talking about earlier, we can run Vim Tutor. And if we do it, this is a program you already have, by the way. If you have a Mac, like you have this program, you don't have to install anything. For Tmux, you might have to install something, but it'd be simple as if you're installing other programs in Linux. It'd just be sudo apt-get install Tmux. But yeah, so this will actually guide you through everything about basically how to use Vim, and you can actually modify the buffer and do it in a safe learning environment. So, and then the last thing would be man Vim, but that's just more about the actual flags and how to change the behavior of Vim while it's executing. And now, thank you for listening, and probably suffering a little bit, but thanks for listening to my talk. It's been a long time coming.